Welcome to this edition of Going the Distance with Go Long. It's a live episode. I am here with Heather Redisch, who is the founder of Adulting 101 Masterclass, and Denise Novosel, who is the VP of Talent Acquisition at Fanatics. Go Long is an accountability coaching service, and the distinction that we do is we do accountability coaching via text. So it's completely bespoke and customized for your life so that you can get the daily nudges you need to make the changes that you want to make. All right. With that, let's introduce our guests. Heather, why don't you give us a little bit of a backstory around how you founded Adulting 101 Masterclass?
Yes. So I have about a little over 25 years of experience in talent management, talent acquisition, people ops, and I love it. And I still do it and I still love it. But within the last 5 years or so, I noticed this decline in confidence with my entry level graduates who were interviewing. Particularly, I was coaching some of my friends' kids who wanted me to just kind of help prepare them. And they're graduating from very prestigious universities, and their confidence was really lacking. And I just kept kind of taking notice and then noticing in my own work while I was interviewing. And I have three girls, and I read a book called The Anxious Generation by Jonathan Haidt, which is a movement right now of trying to get cell phones out of kids' hands and moving them to more of the landlines and, not going smartphone until they're in their later teens. And in the first chapter of the book, it discusses just going through puberty and having a smartphone. And back in 2007, when the smartphone was launched, those individuals who had this technology and we sent them to Mars without really realizing it, then they went through COVID, and they have parents who, and I put myself in the category, can be a little overprotective. It's really stunted their growth from a confidence and communication level into the workplace. And I had this realization that those 2007 kids are now young adults moving into the workforce. And this is why I saw the problem. And it spanned a lot more than just job searching and interviewing. It spanned on basic financial literacy, executive functioning. So that's kind of what it all encompasses, and what the impetus was for me as I was in HR and understood what they needed to do to integrate into onboarding and how to be successful. So Adulting 101 really bridges the gap from college into adulthood, typically in their 20s, that quarter life crisis range.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I think that we're going to get into kind of the impact of technology and my thoughts on it. Denise, I mean, we've known each other now for 23 years. I know that
Oh, yeah.
doesn't make us feel young, but we've known each other for that long. You've been a recruiter for as long as I know you, but maybe you could talk a little bit about how you got into recruiting and your journey as a recruiter.
That's it. It's awesome. And I want to dovetail off of something that Heather said. And if my children are listening right now, they're 15 and 17. And I would say, I feel like the worst parental mistake I made was giving them a cell phone or access to a cell phone in their pre-teens. So totally with you on that, Heather. But yes,
I
so
did
Jill
the
and
same thing. So
we, we go way back. I recruited Jill way back. So my journey in recruiting, I have been leading talent acquisition functions at this point over 25 years. And so we won't go past that date, but you can use your imagination. But I've been leading teams, leading large talent acquisition functions kind of over that time horizon. I've led teams across large enterprises like Microsoft, Nike, Amazon Health Services, and most recently, I'm leading the talent acquisition function for betting and gaming. I did have one point in my career where I led university recruitment. And so I definitely got a glimpse into kind of the dynamics of folks in transitioning, taking on internships, accepting their first real role. And just, I think to Heather's point, just some of the deficiencies and gaps overall. But I just would say, in general, this is a really difficult job market at the moment. And so I am seeing and hearing quite a bit from folks who are in this stage of anticipating graduation in this spring semester, and they're really, really struggling to identify like what is going to be that next step. And, I would say if you rewound 5 years ago, it was really much more abundant in identifying internships that would then lead to full-time roles. And so I think there's a dynamic shift that's taking place. And so I do think that it requires probably a lot more creativity and attention and thinking about their job search and job search strategies.
Yeah, I mean, I think that it's the market, I would say, over the past 3.5 years has done a complete 180. Like 4 years ago, like it was just you couldn't get anyone probably to call you back, Denise, right? And now everybody wants to get in touch with you. So I think that I certainly have never seen a market like this, and we're going to talk about this. I mean, we've been through .com. We're all old enough to have been through .com, the Great Recession, and everything, and this has been truly extraordinary.
The 4 years was COVID, right? And then there was this new kind of change in culture and shift with hybrid and remote.
Mhm.
And so, yeah, 4 years ago, it was raining jobs, but that was also because there was this cultural shift happening from well, this is how I want to work. Um,
Mhm.
and now that the market has gotten more challenging, there's not that flexibility that the candidates are allowed to exercise the way they were originally after COVID, which I would say is something that none of us have ever experienced in our lifetimes either, in terms of just what remote versus hybrid versus being in the office 5 days a week is. So adulting 101. So the reason why I chose that as the name of my company is when you hear people saying like I have to adult today, usually that means something about making difficult decisions in your life that you would rather avoid, whether it's difficult conversations or difficult responsibilities. And it's particularly challenging right now for entry level young professionals because they grew up really with their just texting each other and this is still unfortunately how they do it, and I'm trying to coach my own kids through it, but the hard conversations are not happening face to face or over the phone like we did. The hard conversations are happening over text, and they're also just learning how to even start communicating with each other over text. So when you move into adulthood, you are having to meet these communication skills, these advanced communication skills that we all
Mhm.
sitting on this panel, we grew up learning because we had landlines, because we had no phones, because we were forced into these challenging situations where you had to problem solve. But on top of that, adulting means, how do you organize your day? How are you making yourself most productive? A lot of young professionals grew up with 504s and IEPs, which also wasn't something that was as predominant when we were growing up. So they are expecting human resources to really help them when it starts to become your own responsibility to start managing your day, and if you have ADHD, or how you can be most successful, as well as your finances, paying your bills, understanding your paycheck, and why you're not actually, if Denise offers you a job for 75,000, it's not 75,000, right? It's probably more like 55, 60, if that. And now you have to build a budget off of that. And these are like, this is adulting. It's hard things that you don't want to deal with. And so that's really how I've coined the term in my business.
Yeah, there's a lot to cover in that, particularly the tax thing. And when you get your first paycheck, and I remember getting my first paycheck in high school and being like, what is this? Like, I thought I had done the math in my head, and the math wasn't mathing for me, and then my parents explained that there were these things called taxes, and the place that I worked at was a union shop, so there were
Uh-huh.
union dues even though I wasn't full-time, and all of these things. So it was a very, welcome to the reality world. Um, Denise, we touched upon it. This job market and what you're seeing,
Mhm.
comparing it to job markets that parents have gone through. Like I said, some of them may
Yeah.
have been, in the stock market crash of the late 80s, early 90s. Then there was the dot-com crash. Then there was the Great Recession. Let's talk about this because the three of us have been through some things, but this is quite
We
extraordinary.
have. I mean, and I've said this to a lot of people, it is very unusual in comparison. And I think Heather actually hit it really nicely. And just coming out of COVID, you had this massive course correction where there was just a plethora of open opportunities. You could work from anywhere. You had your say and your pick of different opportunities. And then I would say probably over the last 24 months, there's been a massive course correction. So I think companies had big aspirations and growth that were outpacing and outstripping their revenue. And I think the ultimate impact of that is they had these plans and aspirations to grow businesses that were exceeding what they were doing from an overall business standpoint. Then we saw a really massive course correction, and you've seen a substantial number of layoffs across multiple industries, large corporations, and they just keep coming. I mean, I think anytime you open up your LinkedIn, there's another layoff announcement, someone else's role has been impacted. There's just it doesn't feel like there's an ending where I felt like in prior markets, like you had these blips in 2001 with the dot-com bust and 2007 into 2008. There was like an end. It felt like it was like an 18-month cycle and you could see the end of it. And then you saw companies rehiring. There are certainly, I don't want to seem all doom and gloom because there are definitely companies out hiring, but I do think you have to think differently about that job search because as someone leading a talent acquisition function, I can tell you the inbound applications. So the number of people applying for jobs, we'll open up a job and within like 3 hours, we'll have 500 applications. And so how you actually get like visibility in those spaces. So it's a really fascinating market and one like I've not seen in my career.
All right, so that's actually a really great way to kind of kick this off in terms of a little bit more of the Q&A. You talked about, you know, 500 applications in 3 hours, right? Now, you see all of these things. So first of all, my question is that how soon should someone put a LinkedIn profile up? Should they do it in high school? Should they do it in college? How soon? What is your take in terms of getting the LinkedIn profile up there, and how meaty does it need to be for, like, say, a college freshman?
I mean, I would as soon as someone has relevant content as early as high school. So, maybe they have a high school job that they can post out there. Maybe they're doing volunteer work, like some level of presence that they can start creating. If anything, they can just really start, getting exposed to others on LinkedIn, start seeing what the different trends are, what are companies saying, and then like really start to think about that engagement. I don't think it's too early, ever if you feel like you can put a relevant presence out there.
Does that include, like,
Yeah.
waiting tables? Because, like, I have a nephew, for example, who's a freshman in college, and he waits tables, and I mean, I waited tables. I think there's a lot you learn from waiting tables. So does that count?
Agree. Any relevant experience and then just being very clear in kind of your overall summary and statement of like what are your studies and like your aspirations and maybe he waits tables but maybe he does coaching on the weekends of a youth basketball team or maybe he volunteers with a certain charity or he's doing other things that he can layer in as well.
Heather, you have anything to add in terms of, like, ideas for how you start that LinkedIn
Yeah.
presence?
So I think overall, they're very intimidated by LinkedIn and
Ah,
what they
Yeah.
deem what they deem to be like cringe is like reaching out to people that they don't know to like introduce themselves. We call it networking. They're so uncomfortable with that whole idea. I think, for I've done some high school like little seminars and stuff, and I've noticed that the ones who have profiles in high school are definitely the ones who are more entrepreneurial spirited. And my feeling is, yeah, get on there and at least start understanding how the platform works. Now, the interesting thing is, and I'm sure Denise can agree with me on this, is like, I don't know, in 10 years, is LinkedIn going to be still LinkedIn? Is that going to be the number one platform? We don't know. But what we do know right now is that is the global database for professionals in the world. And
Mhm.
most people who are really engaged in their jobs do show up in some capacity there. And all the universities are typically very keyed into LinkedIn as well. So, starting very lightly in high school, just getting up, a professional photo of yourself, describing some of the things that you're interested in, putting whatever work experience you have, but more about what interests you. Follow companies that are interesting to you, follow people that are thought leaders in spaces that are interesting to you, because that is a way for you just to start to see how people are communicating and reporting on trends and news and all that. And that really can key you into some big opportunities later on in life. So it's just about familiarizing yourself with a piece of technology that you feel very intimidated with.
Really adding on to what Heather was saying too, it's like this is a great opportunity to start activating your network. Who do you know that is it through your parents, alumni, friends? Start making connections. And, I know parents often like we want to help facilitate that. I think parents, sure, we can make introductions or we can make recommendations, but highly recommend the students do their own outreach. Like they're taking action and ownership of making those connections themselves, and like they can take on that like personal accountability. But I think just really starting just to even build out who you're connecting with and following, and maybe you didn't realize that your second cousin is a CFO at some great company, and maybe he'd actually do an informational interview with you just to talk about his job. Really start thinking about it from that perspective.
So one of the questions that came in was that her daughter's graduating not this spring, but next spring. She's applying like mad to get a job, an internship in New York City, right? And she hasn't had many interviews. She's working with her career center and nothing's really coming together. So I have a feeling this is a common problem where everyone's like, I'm going to the career center. Now, when we graduated college, it was definitely the career center. But I'm wondering how relevant career centers are now.
Career centers, I have there here's where I struggle a little bit. They are not as, in my opinion, as keyed into corporate America as I wish or hope that they would be. There are, I think, depending on your major, like one, perhaps two events during the course of a year, which is light in terms of campus recruiting. So there is a platform called Handshake that a lot of companies will post their roles on, which is really specifically dedicated to internships and entry level roles. I always suggest LinkedIn as well. And my biggest kind of advice, if you will, is to work your university network of alum. And if you
Uh-huh.
have a company that you've applied to, or there's a goal company that you really want to work at, really work the alum who are there. Hopefully, you can find just one person who has, within your university that is working there or has a connection to someone who works there. And that to me is really the best way now, because the career centers, I don't know, I'm struggling with them personally, but maybe Denise has a different perspective.
Yeah, I mean, I'm a big plus one to your thoughts on that, Heather. I think it doesn't hurt. but it probably wouldn't be like my only recommended avenue. I think like working through your network, working through alumni channels, like really following companies that you're interested in. What is the depth of their internship program? Is that something that is like regularly sponsored? What understanding and knowing like their application timelines and deadlines? Do they have on campus visits that they're doing, depending on what degree program you're in? Often, different organizations with internship programs will do very specialized events with different
Mhm.
universities and different programs. So like really probably doing that work outside of the career center and what you can do to identify there, I think is probably the recommendation I would make. Definitely don't put all
One
your
of the
eggs in that
things
basket.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I mean, one of the things I always tell people, regardless of experience level, is to work backwards from the company
Wow.
that they're interested in, not even like a job, because there may not even be a job opening. But
Yep.
a lot of times you want to like be in someone's mind when a job does open. I mean, both can talk about this, how so many jobs are filled before they're even posted, right? And
Yep.
so that like pre-networking is really important. And so I try and tell people, start with the company, put that in the search bar in LinkedIn, and then see who in your network has a connection there. Because you're going to be young, you probably won't have a connection there, but the more that you build your network, there is a higher likelihood that someone will have a second degree connection there. Where
Yeah.
like I can ask you, Heather, hey, do you know Jane at
Right.
XYZ company? Would you be willing to make an introduction for me? And
Right.
and I think to Denise's point, the parent coaching the kid on how to make that ask of Heather
Yeah.
is
Yeah.
really
So
important.
here's a couple of things. I do want to just take one step back and say you should still go to your career center. Like where the problem is starting right now is that young adults only want to apply to jobs. They don't want to do the hard stuff behind the scenes, which is reaching out to people and trying to network. But like, first of all, we know the market's not great. You need to be going after every single possible resource. So even if the career center isn't the greatest resource, you should still go there and see who they are connected to, who their relationships are with, because they might have great relationships with certain companies that could really help you. And then there's obviously a lot of other ways. This is all about taking initiative. And that's very hard for this generation because things are not they've just not been taught how to really take initiative and make themselves comfortable being uncomfortable. They can just do everything behind their screen and just apply and pray um, there's just one more thing I want to say about that, which is getting into college right now is stupid hard. And the reason why it's so hard is because the Common App has created this situation where you can apply to 20 schools now in one fell swoop. Well, we didn't have that growing up. We had to be strategic. We picked probably 5 schools and crossed our fingers and toes, and that was really how it was. Now you apply to 20, 30 schools. Well, they're all being inundated with all these applications, which is why it's so hard to get into school now. This is the same problem in the job search. Now that there are so many, applicant tracking systems and technologies, you can apply to so many jobs, but that creates so many more candidates. So, how are you going to stand out in the job market? You have to work it from every single angle to see who knows who in order to get you in front of the right people.
On that angle of being creative, like what are the things that you could do that you're like uniquely qualified for? Maybe there's a particular company you're interested in and you're a marketing communications major and you're like, gosh, this company is not doing XYZ type of marketing, or they don't know, the Gen Z consumer insights, or maybe there's something specific that you can like serve up and offer up to them. And almost like the idea is more like a reverse mentor. So maybe you're gonna lean in and provide like some bi-directional like mentorship and do reverse mentoring with a leader in a company who could take advantage of your like specific knowledge and skills. The one of the things I was thinking is like our youth are, from a technology standpoint, far more advanced. And so maybe there's a company that you could help them leverage AI to drive efficiency. And you can go in and like do almost like a micro consulting project for them, like really almost like micro internships. Think about it more from that perspective of like, what are you uniquely qualified to do that even if you're offering to do it pro bono just to build a portfolio, just getting really, really creative because the posting applying to 20 to 30 jobs a day and getting no response is probably equally as frustrating.
Yeah, someone asked a question about that. We'll get to that. The one thing that I'll say for Francine is that I studied abroad fall semester senior year. I think that what makes it better now is that there is email and there is LinkedIn, and that could be
Mm.
accessed anywhere, right? And it kind of reduces like the having to be at those events in person on campus because you still can do that outreach and you can, reach out to the career center and say, "Hey, I'm studying abroad this semester. Is there any way I could get connected? I could find out who the speakers were." And then you could reach out to them on LinkedIn. The student can reach out to them directly on LinkedIn and saying like, "Hey, I heard you were at my school, but I am studying abroad in Paris right now, so I couldn't attend, but I'd love to know when I get back if we can get on a call," right? So that's just what I wanted to add in terms of studying abroad. I think it could be an advantage because then you're not going to be in a room with everybody else. You could send a message and say like, "Hey, I'm studying abroad." So just that. So I want to go to a question that came in. I'm going to read it. So there are people who are on this call who have kids who are juniors and seniors in high school, and they don't want this transition in 4 years to be so dramatic, right? So they're trying to lay the groundwork now. So we talked about already setting up the LinkedIn profile, to the best of your ability and everything else. What else would you recommend? I mean, Denise, you have a 15 and a 17-year-old, right? Like, what are you telling them?
Yeah. I mean, honestly, it's all about like what are the different leadership opportunities you have now? And like, a good example, my 15-year-old son is attending a boarding school and he had an opportunity to be an ambassador for the school. And so it's a job. And so he gets to actually like talk about that as, what is he doing to mentor and guide incoming students? And I encouraged him to do it because I actually felt like he is good at doing that, like that's kind of his vibe and personality, but it's a really great way to like interact, communicate with people, talk to people face to face, kind of be a resource, and honestly, quite honestly, start building connections with people you may not have an opportunity to engage with outside of that. So I would just say, just in general, what are those opportunities? Do you have an opportunity to volunteer? Do you have an opportunity to tutor? Do you have an opportunity to coach? Like doing things that you can then like leverage as work product. You can put it on your LinkedIn profile. You can talk about it. So I think it's taking those opportunities.
So, I think that's great. I once hired someone who was an RA. I was like, if
Yeah,
you're an RA during COVID, oh my God, like that was it.
Totally.
I mean, like she had
Can
other
you imagine?
qualifications, but
yeah.
seriously, if you could be a resident assistant in the 2021
Yeah.
2022 academic year, I mean,
Mhm.
holy shit,
You deserve
right?
any job. Um,
Yeah.
I, I'm gonna add something to this, and it's not. I feel like high school is a little premature, and this is not a career. This is not a career advice. This is financial advice, which is once they hit college, and I would say, if we're going to be able to swear here, I'm all in on that. Like, I
Yes, we
think
can we
shit.
can swear on this
I
show.
I think shit gets really, really real starting around their junior year where they really are starting to understand like I don't have a lot more time. Like this is going to be happening before I know it. And parents get really frustrated with sometimes how kids spend their money in college and that there's a lot of, now that again, it's just another form of no one's touching money anymore. Everything is, through apps and Venmo and Apple Pay. And so you're not really getting a true concept of how much money you're spending. And so I always suggest to my parents that the kids that this young adults that I coach is, by junior year, you should start sitting down with them at least on a quarterly basis or monthly, depending on when you see them and depending when you can have the conversation and saying to them like, this is how many times you did Uber Eats this year or this month or this quarter. And this is how many times you took an Uber. And this is how many times you ordered this, that, and the other. And just being able to explain to them like these are your habits. And when you graduate, this is how much money you could potentially save by not doing Uber Eats, by just going to walk across the street to pick up that food versus having someone deliver it, right? Like, I know it sounds, but it's true that everything is just immediate access. They don't understand. And then the parents get all, which is what happens in my companies too. Like the older generations get all pissed at the younger generations for being entitled or being lazy or whatever. Well, the same thing goes for parents and their kids and the money when they're just pushing money to their kids all through college. And then they get all pissed that, oh, my kids spent, all this money. Well, because no one's telling them their behaviors. So just starting to take some sort of like, here's what you're doing and like, here's how we could, and just educating them, I think is really important.
Heather, one of the things we talked about when you were on the show was the fact that some of your students, clients were like, is lunch paid for? Or do I have
Yeah.
to pay for my transportation to work? Because no one took the time to explain to them. I mean, now some companies, like in Seattle, if you work downtown, a lot of companies will reimburse you for mass transit, right? Like there
A
are
lot of
companies who
companies
do that.
do. A lot of companies, they
But
help with that
but
reimbursement. But
that's not a given. And as a parent, you
yep.
need to explain that, like, a lot of times you're responsible for for paying your own lunch. You don't get a stipend for that. And
Nope.
if nothing else, I want the parents, they should listen to the interview that I did with you that kind of goes into that in more detail. But you have to be a lot more prescriptive about what is and isn't included in that
Yeah.
in that compensation package, for lack of a better way of putting it.
Yeah. 100%.
One question that came in is that there's person asked the best advice to keep a recent grad motivated when they are constantly being ghosted when applying for jobs and everything else and trying to follow up an email and they're trying to do like all of these things and they're just being ghosted. What advice do you have for them to stay in the game mentally?
I mean, I think part of it is really being I get, and I'll take a step back. I get it. This is what is happening across the board. And so one thing I think is just to reinforce to them, like, this isn't a signal about your worth and your value in the world. Like, you just take it for what it is. Like, don't let it impact you personally, emotionally, physically, all of the things, but really start thinking about how you're prioritizing your applications and where are you putting your energy. And honestly, I think one of my tips for folks too is, while I've talked a lot about LinkedIn and I'm a huge fan, get off of LinkedIn as much as you possibly can. Go to the places and search for job opportunities that are not abundant on LinkedIn. What are the companies that you're interested in? Set up your GPTs, track, figure out when they're opening roles, be ready to apply when they first open, because I think that is the other thing that's happening a lot is we're getting so much inbound. You might be the perfect person, but you came in at application 101 and they cut off the application reviews at the first 100. So you may not have ever even been visible in that search. And so I think just the biggest thing is just thinking about how do you find different avenues to identify open roles and apply for them. But secondly, do not let it impact you personally. It's not a signal about your value and your self-worth, and it's happening all over the place.
I have a question for Denise, if that's okay.
Yeah.
So,
That's okay.
okay. So something I've started experimenting with when I'm doing more of my one-on-one coaching is a portfolio and building a website on Squarespace that
Yep.
is basically your website. And when we think portfolio, we usually think, oh, well, I'm not a creative. That's not what I'm talking about. What I'm talking about is a site and it sits under right like under your resume, your name, your phone number, your email address, your LinkedIn profile, and then your website, your portfolio of yourself. And in that portfolio is maybe like a 60-second intro to who you are, a video. Maybe it's, it goes over things that, besides the projects, it'll have your resume housed on there. It'll have maybe some passion projects, maybe some things that you like to do for fun, like a true, just like holistic description of who you are versus just a LinkedIn profile or just a resume. What do you think of that?
Yeah, I mean, I think any way to express yourself that gives people more visibility. I mean, I would say like the typical thing with resumes is you basically have, Heather, check me on this, 12 to 15 seconds to get someone's attention. So maybe they'll
Right.
click on your portfolio and be like, oh, I want to learn more about Jill, or I
Yes.
want to learn like any way to differentiate yourself and like
Right.
bring out your authentic
Yeah.
self. It can't
The other
hurt.
piece of
Okay.
advice I got with the website is that when someone Googles you, you want to kind of control what shows up. I mean, maybe it's not
Mhm.
Google anymore, maybe it's ChatGPT. But the thing is that if I type in Heather Redisch into ChatGPT, what comes up, right? And if a
Yep.
website is another, say, search result as opposed to something else, like that's just another thing that you have control over what the story is about
Yeah,
you.
I
So
love
that was
that.
something that was advice that was given to me, I don't know, like 12 years ago. So obviously it was more web and Google based, but I think it can apply to doing searches on ChatGPT to have like a domain with your name on it. And they're not that expensive. You can get it on Squarespace. You might even be able
Yeah,
to get a student
exactly.
discount. So I think that that's a fantastic idea. A related question around just like morale. There's this one person who says that their child is a junior and they're in a major they don't love. Like they committed to the major and now they're just like, ugh, right? And the parent doesn't know how to give guidance and they're worried about the kid like floundering after graduation. Like, do you have any advice for that? Because let's say it's not an option to like do the 5 year plan.
I'm like, just go take temp jobs. Go take, like, just start taking temp jobs. Go experience different types of work until you like really figure out what's my path forward, especially if there's not like a direction. There's like no shame in doing that. A lot of those types of roles turn into like long-term opportunities, or maybe you'll find your passion. I like totally fell into recruiting. Actually, most recruiters would say they fell into
Yeah.
recruiting. I was a biology major. I thought I was going to be a physical therapist until I did an internship and said, oh my God, that is not what I want to do with my life. So I took a temp job that landed me in a space that then linked me to like my ultimate career. So I think that's perfectly reasonable.
It's interesting because there's also people who don't have the luxury, say, of doing an internship, which may be lower paying, versus taking a job like waiting tables, which I did, and you could make a lot of money waiting
Yeah.
tables, right? And like she had to contribute to this person their daughter had to contribute to their college education. So they didn't have the latitude to be like, oh, I could take like this low paying internship that's in my career field because I had to contribute to my college education. Do you feel that that is setting someone? I have my opinion on this, but do you feel that's setting that person back versus not?
I could go on a soapbox about how I truly believe universities should be playing a much larger part in, like, if you're going to accept a university and everyone's, filming themselves and, they got into their dream school, I want to know what the percentage rate of how employed they are. Like, what is even with the job market that's not, as robust, if you will, like I want to know what those percentages are because I don't believe universities are held to that, their feet held to the fire of great. You're taking all these really, really talented, smart people. Are you getting them like, are you helping in working with them to get them in some sort of job? And it shouldn't matter. Like, yeah, if you have to wait tables or you have to do Uber driving or whatever, you're making money for school. Like, that shouldn't
Mhm.
be the problem. It's that if you are in college, then that school should be helping you way more than they are right now. So, like, one university I'm
Mhm.
obsessed with is Northeastern. They
Mhm.
do something called a oh goodness, I'm forgetting what it's an not an externship, but kind of like an externship where they spend a semester working, like, no classes,
So
but
it's like a
they're
study abroad, except an occupational one.
Yeah.
exactly, and companies, they are connected with the university and they help with these externships, or I'm forgetting the name, but anyways, but they are there full time for one semester. Now they graduate a semester later, but what I can tell you is, and I was working with a student there right now, sadly, job posts typically are saying 2 to 4 years of experience, right?
Mhm.
And when you're an entry level, that really makes it difficult for you. Well, if school is
Mhm.
integrating work into their life, then when you are
Mhm.
graduating, now suddenly you kind of have around 2 years of experience if you're doing a couple of externships or co-ops or whatever
Yeah,
while
I thought it
you're
was co-op was what happened in my head.
co-op while
Yeah,
you're
Autumn got it.
working or while you're going to school. And I hope that universities start adopting this more to their cultures, because it that actually catapults these
Mhm.
students into school. And there's a significant difference I saw with that particular student who I coached versus others who just haven't had those experiences.
Denise, what are your thoughts? Do you think that you need, like, if you have the trade-off of like getting the industry internship versus like taking a job that's more lucrative in terms of paying for education, what are your thoughts on that?
I mean, it's hard to comment because it's, like, so personal for every single person, and I think it really, like, depending on your personal circumstances, any work experience is great experience. Like, it doesn't matter what you end up doing, it's like, you can use all of your work experience to create a narrative. You can talk about leadership, you can talk about problems you solve. Like, no matter what job you're doing, you can start building a narrative, and you can start thinking about, like, what about that role did I thrive, like, what were the aspects of that role that really I thrived in, that I wanna go, pursue more opportunities like that? Or maybe you determine, gosh, that's just, analytical work is not for me. I would rather be out in front of customers selling, or whatever the thing might be, that any experience is good experience. And I think personal situations, what makes most sense for you, and especially when it comes to financial decisions.
When I think about tech, right? And if someone's worked in a restaurant, I think customer success, entry level customer success, you know how to deal with cranky customers, right? So I mean, I think that there's a lot of things that can translate. Being a coach, basketball coach, baseball coach, whatever that is. I think it's, talking to people and having your student get input from people on how you can couch that experience, not in an insincere way, but to get them to see, like, oh, there's parallels to this. This is what you do in customer success in entry level, right? This is what you do as an SDR, sales development representative.
Well, and I've seen kids, like, doing, jobs as referees. How hard is that? Like,
Yeah.
you're refereeing, basketball games, whatever the thing is, you've got parents and fans, like, what you have to actually deal with on the court, like, I think you can turn any work experience into a good narrative and storytelling.
Well, yeah, that's why I said the RA thing. Like when I saw the
Yeah,
RA thing, I was like, oh, front of the
yeah.
pack. All right. Michelle in Arizona says she has a son who's graduating in May, stats and analytics major, currently working a part-time internship as a business analyst, anxious about finding a full-time role, common, and he hasn't been informed yet if he's going to get a full-time role where he's at. So this is someone who is interested in the sports industry. How does he network into sports? Because obviously sports is a thing that a lot of people are, it's almost like mission driven, right? Like they love sports. What do you recommend? And I know, Heather, you've had a couple of clients who were trying to get into the
Well,
sports
the
industry as
first
well.
thing I would say is I don't know where her son is, but I coached a student who worked at or who was at University of Arizona, and he would do stats for ugh, I don't know the team out there, but the baseball team. He would help
The
with the stat.
Diamondbacks?
Maybe, yeah. Um, maybe. But Michelle out there, reach out to me because I can connect you with that student who now graduated and he writes for the Beat like in one of the areas and again, that's just like light networking, right? The similar kind of feel.
It's pretty typical right now. Companies are holding back on making commitments to intern conversions, and a lot of it has to do with not being able to predict overall headcount. So I think that's a real thing. One recommendation, and I've given this to a few people, is if you're doing an internship and you're waiting to be converted and you know headcount is a concern, if you have no other options, let that company know, hey, bring me on a contract basis. I'll like continue this work
Yes.
and I'll come on as a contract. And if you have a full-time role later, great. But just to kind of add to the whole sports industry, to add on to what Heather was saying, if he's a strong analyst, has these like great mathematical and analytical skills, what are the different sports teams he's interested in? Does he like, maybe he can run some overall analysis for them, share
Yes.
his thoughts and input into feedback and like just do it. Like, hey, introduce himself. Hey, I was like looking at like this set of data and here's some anomalies or things that I recognize that you may not be aware of, and like just toss over some free research to them to try to get some attention.
I love that. You know what? Yes, it's seasonal, so that those types of things. But the other thing I was going to say is, first of all, there are so many recent grads who go intern now, right now, after they've graduated, because they are eventually converting. You just have to be patient. And it's just like college. How are you showing the interest? Showing the interest in a company, saying I will intern. I have no problem interning to start is great. Also, though, what I've also noticed is they are not. They're like they're not confident in actually speaking up and saying, "Hey, uh, would you be interested in me working full time? Like, would you consider me? Do you have potential headcount?" They're kind of just humming along and hoping that the company's going to approach them. But the truth is, that's not top of mind for them. And so I always say, like, no one's thinking about you more than you. So self
Mhm.
advocating and telling them, A, I would intern longer if you need that time, but B, would you consider me? You don't know unless you ask.
Well, I think the sports metaphor
Yep.
is you miss 1,000% of the shots that you don't take, right? And
Yes.
so, you know, taking that initiative and asking. The other question I was going to ask you, because I've advised some people to do this, is that especially for like someone like a statistics analytics major, is what if they set up like an Upwork or a Fiverr account where they do like little jobs for people and they set up a little shop there to kind of just like bring in some money? What do you think of that?
I love
I don't
it.
think
I
it's a
mean,
bad
I don't know
idea.
if anyone watches Gary V. Does anyone see Gary? Does anyone follow Gary
Gary
V?
Vaynerchuk. We'll
Yeah.
link to Gary Vaynerchuk.
Yeah, I love him, and he's just like, this is the greatest time for this generation. They can side hustle anything that they really want to put their minds to, and so it's just a matter of actually executing. They have way more opportunity than we did when we were, we were just doing whatever side jobs we could. They have real opportunities. So, yes, the more entrepreneurial spirit they show, and no matter what it is, yeah. Sorry, go ahead, Denise.
I was just going to say, but I think it's having the courage to put yourself out there. And I think your earlier points around like this generation and ability to communicate face to face and like have like those real conversations. It's a struggle. I mean, we were out there hustling magazines and chocolate bars and knocking on our neighbors' doors. And this
Knives,
generation has
knives.
they've not had.
All right, we got
That's
one
funny.
final question, but I think every generation has like a struggle. And of course, the current generation is like, you don't understand and everything else. And, yeah, there's differences. Like when we graduated, Microsoft Office, which now sounds antiquated, was also doing a massive like technology replacement from typewriters, right? And there was all this like doom and gloom and displacement and everything else. And I think that AI, the change is very rapid, a lot quicker than Microsoft Office, just like the
Oh, yeah.
internet was and everything else. But it's one of those things where every generation has their thing that they have to work through and adapt to. So the last question we have is that there's a person where their nephew had an internship, but they can't hire him for full time. And he's doing tons of interviewing, but basically everyone's like, we don't have budget. We can't hire you. You're great, but right now. So at what point do you sit there and say, fuck it, I got to get like money in because I don't have the luxury of, say living at home with my parents, rent free and everything else. Like, at what point do you kind of just like pull the cord and you're like, hey, I got to like bring in some money?
Here's my thought, because I have a number of students right now that are, they graduated in June, it's February, and they're still struggling. I feel like if you can find a part-time job or volunteering, you need to create a schedule for yourself. Looking for jobs day in and day out is so depressing. So you will burn out in 2 seconds. You need to create a schedule for yourself during the week where you wake up. You maybe you have this part-time job, maybe you're volunteering somewhere. And plus, you don't know who you could meet as you're out there doing those types of odd jobs. But it's best for
Mhm.
your mental health that you keep yourself busy doing something, and you need to be reminded this isn't your job for the rest of your life. This is for now. Everybody understands the state of this economy, and no one thinks that you're going to be doing one thing or the other for the rest of your life if you're just trying to to make some money. Plus, I believe companies would appreciate that. In the meantime, they know the job market's hard. If you are answering that kind of question, like, what have you been doing?
Mhm.
I've been searching like crazy. I've fallen, short a few times. I'm, taking on odd jobs. I have a part-time job. I'm volunteering, and I'm looking for jobs as much as I can. And I don't think that any company would disrespect that.
I wholeheartedly agree. And I would 100% just be out there doing something, like whether it's volunteering or tutoring or, maybe there is a new business in town and you're like going to volunteer and help them build a marketing plan because you're a Marcom major. Like just do something to put yourself out there to feel like you're using your skills. And to Heather's point, you really don't know you never know who you're going to meet. You never know who you're going to get connected with, who then can be a reference
Yeah.
for you. So it's putting yourself out there.
You never know who you're going to meet at like a certain event.
When you meet people, not in an awkward, weird way, but like ask questions about them. Oh, what do you do? Or what inspire, m- talk to people, talk to as many people as you possibly can. I landed in recruiting because I was talking to somebody on a treadmill next to me. That's how I got into recruiting. So I think just, strike up conversation with somebody in line in Starbucks or whatever. Just start having those like face to face interactions and meet people.
I think the other thing that I'll just add to like having those random conversations is that it'll build confidence for when you are
Mhm.
talking to someone that you haven't met before in an interview situation, right? You don't want you don't want to be getting your practice reps in an interview. You want to be comfortable striking up conversations and engaging with people in what I would call low pressure situations. You don't want to be doing that for the first time in a job interview and not sure how you're going to react because it's a muscle like anything else. You have to develop the muscle. I mean, even though we're of a different generation, we still had to develop that muscle. It came to us differently because of technology that was available at the time.
Yeah.
Yeah. One final thought is learning how to build rapport with people. And especially when you get on a Zoom in an interview for the first like moments of like actually like making some type of connection with the human being on the other end of the screen. So, so important.
All right, so that's Denise's takeaway. Heather, what's your piece of advice?
Well, after you both just spoke, this is what I think I'm going to actually talk about tomorrow on my Instagram is, and I posted about this a couple of days ago from somebody else, which is talk to strangers. Try talking to strangers. Just like Denise said, introduce yourself at at a Starbucks line, or like it gets your reps in. And no one's judging you. Just try smiling and talking to strangers. If it's somebody that's waiting on you, if it's somebody who's at the grocery store, just try and engage and work that muscle, because to Denise's point, they can look at your resume for, 10 seconds. They're also sizing you up pretty quick on an interview too. And so those first impressions matter. And the more you're able to engage that interviewer with you, the better you're going to do. And the only way you can do that is by continuing to work that muscle on how to talk to people that you don't know.
Yeah, I think that, oh my God, I love that. I met a hiring manager at Awake, and she was able to get me a full-time job when I was a contractor. I mean, yeah, I mean,
I love it.
that's amazing.
I love it.
You just don't know. I think the one thing you just don't know. I think that the one thing that I will add is that there's the whole being curious thing. That's the thing that I will add. I was talking to a client of mine who's a partner at a law firm yesterday, and one of the things that she is struggling with the more junior staff is there needs to be more curiosity, right? And so I would encourage the parents on this call, and if there's a student on here, then I would encourage you to be more curious, because technology could sometimes make you a little bit more lax in doing that follow through and doing that research. Be curious. When you're interviewing with a hiring manager, like let's say Denise is doing a phone screen with you, be curious about the company. Be curious about the role. Be curious about what a day in the life is like, because people are going to evaluate you based on the questions you ask the interviewer, right? So be curious. That's my takeaway. But
love it.
All right. Yes, do your research, have a point of view. Absolutely. All right, I know we're at time. It's late, particularly for those folks on the East Coast who are freezing to death, and the people in Central Time Zone. In Seattle, it was 60 degrees today and sunny. I don't know what's happening right now.
Brag.
I
Brag
don't know.
Away.
Denise knows this is not normal. Anyway, I want to thank everyone for joining in. We will be sending out a recording of this conversation. I believe we got to all the questions. If we did not get to all the questions, you can reach us in the contact information. You can reach me, and we will get the question answered. I really appreciate everyone's time. You will be able to contact everybody on here. Thank you to Denise. Thank you to Heather. Really appreciate it. Also, thanks to John behind the scenes, who handles all of the show logistics and everything else. He produces this show, Going the Distance with Go Long. So with that, remember, it's your life. Go the distance, go long.